So I'm rocking up to work every day, opening the laptop. You've no customer emails comes in. You've no projects. We're all just trying to desperately figure out which way do we go. We couldn't agree which way we go. And then all of a sudden you get this RFP across your desk, and it's something we can all align on and focus on and sort of rally behind. And whilst it mightn't have been a massive opportunity for any other player in our industry, for us it was a lifeline. And that was tough because 3 years, the first 3 years, we didn't raise a single invoice, no customer for 3 years. So yeah, no customer at all.
Nick Keegan, thank you very much for joining me.
Thank you very much. Delighted to be here.
Let's start with the business. So Mail Metrics, what do you do? Who are the customers? What kind of size you are, and whatever you're kind of comfortable with sharing.
Sure. So we are a customer communications platform. We help businesses in highly regulated sectors such as banks, insurance, pensions to digitally transform how they communicate and engage with their customers. So if you think of yourself as a consumer of car or home insurance, for example, you can typically have two different experiences. On the one hand, you may purchase insurance and everything is done through the mail. You get your insurance renewal or your quotes and so on and so forth, all delivered through the post. And then you can have an experience where you have a fully digital self-serve. Everything is done through the web. All your documents and communications are delivered electronically. We help these regulated organizations move from a very paper-heavy focus of dealing with their customers to a more digital experience.
Why? And so when I came across your business and had a look at it, I kind of thought, yeah, I get a lot of paper post that I don't want to get, basically. Like the revenue will send it to me. I got one from a hospital the other day and I was just like, why can't this be sent to me digitally? What is it that these companies, regulated companies, why is it that they haven't already transitioned to this years ago?
It's a good question. I ask myself that sometimes. So a lot of it has got to do with legacy systems. So they're all operating on very old mainframe legacy systems, which are not, let's say that it's not a very modern cloud system with API access and so on and so forth. So legacy systems is one thing. Generally, they're quite conservative organizations. They always take a very conservative view of the regulation and what the regulation says you can and cannot do. And sometimes it's just inertia, to be honest with you. It's the way they've always done things. You'll see in some industries, like in banking, everybody gets their bank statement electronically. In utilities, everybody gets a utility bill electronically, or at least that option is available to you. But it's everything else. So it's the 80-20 rule. Like everything else still remains on paper. Your direct debit mandates, missed payment notifications, so on and so forth. And that's really where we target.
How did you get into this business?
I had a passion for it since I was 5 years. No, myself and a mate of mine had an idea for an app. The idea was that you'd have an app as a consumer, you'd have an app on your phone that consolidated all of your online bills and statements into one place. So you didn't have to go to your banking 365 to get your statement, and you didn't have to go to your Vodafone to get your Vodafone bill. It's all in one place. And we'd no business background really. So I was 24 when I had the idea, and we said we'd give this a crack for the summer basically and see how it pans out. So we somehow managed to convince angel investors to give us 700 grand to start this business. That idea totally failed. It was a terrible idea in the end. But we'd raised enough money that we kind of were able to pivot and flounder our way through the first 3 years until, and because of that idea, we got good attention from the insurance companies and utilities. So most of them met us because we were young, we had a novel idea. And none of them wanted to buy it, but equally, like, we built the relationships, and then somebody came to us one day with a tender and said, we have a tender for a mailroom we have in our basement. We want to get rid of this mailroom. We don't want to do mail anymore. We want to give that problem to someone else, and then we want to digitize it all. Is that what you do? And we just said, that's exactly what we do. And we pivoted in that direction. And that was our first customer, won that, and then just grew it organically from there. So.
Take me back to when you were starting the application kind of business and idea that you had. So you said you'd no business background, but somehow you managed to get 700 grand funding from angels. What was the kind of what was the process there, or what was your kind of mindset in and around this application? And I suppose, how did you convince people that to give you the money for it?
Yeah, good question. I suppose we came up with the idea and said, well, let's start this business. It's like, how do you even start a business? Like, you didn't even know, what you register a limited company. How do you do that? Like, very basic stuff. And my dad is an entrepreneur in his own right, and he was like, well, you need to, for something like this, you need to raise investors, right? It's going to cost money to build it and so on. So then you start trying to figure out, how do I raise investors? Pretty quickly in Ireland anyway, you get onto the Enterprise Ireland track and you start engaging with Enterprise Ireland. And then you just get caught up in this machine where, okay, so you need to try become a HPSU, high potential startup. So you get money from EI, and then if they're willing to give you that, if you can find alternative funding, you start speaking to all the angels. I think there's actually a really good infrastructure in Ireland to raise that money if you have a good idea. But it took us probably 2 years or maybe 18 months to raise the money. And we just got a lot of no's along the way, but you kind of perfect your pitch as you go, and you start to build your own confidence that you might actually have to raise this money,
See, so the infrastructure was there, but you even said yourself that it wasn't actually a good idea in the end. I suppose this particular idea didn't meet its. Was it the first kind of contact with customers, or when did you kind of realize that this wasn't something that you wanted to kind of grow?
The problem we made, and I think a lot of first-time founders make, is they think that their idea is so good they don't want to talk to anybody about it in case they steal it. So we were like in stealth mode. We were building this product, and we thought it was the best thing since sliced bread. And we were so naive. We were solving a consumer problem, because a lot of people say that's not a terrible idea. I'd use something like that. But you're not the customer, right? The customer is the bank, the utility, the insurance company, the one who controls how the communications are sent and where they're sent. And ultimately, they didn't want their customers going to a third-party app. They wanted them going to their web portal where they can upsell, cross-sell, get a meter reading, whatever it is. They wanted them on their own web property. And so it was only when we actually started pitching to customers, after we raised the money, like, I'm kind of exaggerating a little bit. Of course, we talked to customers, right? But it was only when we really went into the wild with an MVP and started showing it to customers that they were like, this is not for us. And pretty quickly we started to realize that, oh my God, like we've made a mistake here, And that was tough, because 3 years, like first 3 years, we didn't raise a single invoice, no customer for 3 years. So yeah, no customer at all, which was really hurts the morale, and it's hard to keep the team motivated. We couldn't figure out a way to pivot until this opportunity that came in the door like 3 years in. So a lot of luck involved in something just landing on your desk and you saying, oh, we're just going to double down on that.
How close were you to kind of shutting down and just giving up before that opportunity came along?
Yeah, it's I think every one of these stories, everybody's always on death's door, just about to close down. But genuinely, we kind of were. Like, we had a team of maybe 7 or 8 people, 3 founders, and the rest were software developers. So you pretty quickly burned through 700 grand. And it got to the point where we let everybody go except the founders and 1 software developer. And even then, we were hemorrhaging money. So the contract that we won in probably December 2015, if it hadn't have been for that contract, we probably would have ran out of cash, within the next 4 or 5 months. And whilst that contract wasn't enough to make us profitable, it was bringing in enough cash that we could keep moving forward, if you know what I mean. And then the next customer we won off the back of that, we eventually became profitable a couple of years later.
So how long from when you got that customer was that? I suppose, how did that feel? Well, and was it a complete change of kind of energy and everything within the office? Yeah,
100%. Like, imagine going to work every day and not having anything to do, right? Because you've no customers, and I'm the only one. I was in an office, like a 1-person office on my own here. My 2 business partners are Polish, so they moved home to Poland to set up the dev team because it's cheaper to hire people out there at the time. So I'm rocking up to work every day. opening the laptop. You've no customer emails comes in. You've no projects. We're all just trying to desperately figure out which way do we go. We couldn't agree which way we go. And then all of a sudden you get this RFP across your desk, and it's something we can all align on and focus on and sort of rally behind. And whilst it mightn't have been a massive opportunity for any other player in our industry, for us it was a lifeline. So we just spent like every minute of the day perfecting this tender. And when we won it, like, for us, that was just light at the end of the tunnel. We have something here. And we basically pitched an MVP of a product that we thought would solve their problem. And we built it in the background, and we kind of just made it work, delivered that project on time, on budget. And because, we, you know, again, that was the only thing we had to focus on, you know. So, yeah, it really lifted the mood in the business.
What do you think you would have done? Because I just think from that moment essentially to where you are now, it's almost, I think, and I could be wrong, but if someone had said to you, you know, you're going to have a turnover of 200 million in 10 years' time from when you were sitting there with no customers, that might have been pretty difficult for you to comprehend at that stage.
I wouldn't have believed it. Like even our business plans when you're raising angel investment, which I thought I was taking the piss a little bit with the numbers. I was like, Jesus, we're really over-egging it here. Was even much further behind where we are today. So I suppose even in my wildest notions then, I didn't think we'd get to the size we are now.
So do you think you were in the Defence Forces? Is that right? Before you...
Army Reserve, Army Reserve. So I was so in a part-time capacity, but that was my intention was to do that full-time. But they only recruit once a year. And at the time when we started the business, it was 2013, but it was still, we were still feeling the impacts of 2008, and public sector recruitment wasn't, you know, they had embargoes and all this stuff. So in the periods between recruitment competitions, you needed to find something to do. So we started this business basically, but I fully intended to go back to that, which just was never to be, because we raised the money in the end, and my life just took a different.
And why? What was it about the army essentially why was that your kind of ambition and your you know what you wanted to do with your life prior to this?
Again, my dad is in the Defence Forces, and would have just been exposed to that growing up. Just as a young boy, just sounds like a really cool job, you know, sounds like an exciting career. And I don't know, I just latched onto it. And it was probably the first time that I ever set myself a goal and really, you know, like double down on a tunnel vision that this is what I want to do. And I kind of scratched that itch through the reserve, because I spent 11 years in the reserve in the end. Like that overlapped with starting the business. So I was still in the reserve for a long time when I was running the business. Became a commissioned officer in the reserve, and I felt like I ticked that box, you know. And when I look back on it, I think probably if I had got in, I wouldn't have stuck around for very long. I think I was probably more motivated about how difficult it was to get in to the role. And I might have actually got in, and then the thrill of the chase of actually achieving that might have worn off. But just when I reflect on it, that's kind of how I feel today.
Was business in the back of your mind ever? No.
But there was probably, if you could say, there was probably entrepreneurial traits that I just didn't identify at the time. Like I was the kid out with the lawnmower, knocking on people's doors to cut their grass or wash your car, and doing a terrible job of it, but persistent nonetheless. And I'd always think, well, that's a good business idea. And I'd go home and I'd say to my outfit, like, what about this? Like, this is a good idea. Most of them would tell me are terrible ideas. Actually, until I came home with the idea for the business as it is today, or the initial idea, says that's a good one. Like, you should explore that one. So I probably did have that entrepreneurial trait, but I never identified it in myself.
You get that first customer over the line, and you've got some revenue coming in finally, and I suppose more importantly, you've kind of got a direction now that you know someone will pay for something that you can build, and it's potentially scalable. What do the next kind of few years look like? Kind of getting, I suppose, before your first acquisition, what did the next few years look like?
Still a pretty slow ramp up, to be honest. So it was end of year 3, we got our first customer. It was by year 7, 2019. It's in the year 7. We hit our first million in revenue, like 100 grand profit. So that was a massive milestone for us, and we like celebrated to beat the band, right? Just because to do $1 million in sales, like that was such a big deal for us after 7 years. But like, we weren't a high growth technology business by any stretch of the imagination. And that was just kind of grinding it out, winning one customer after the next, generally small customers, because if we were to go to the big banks, the big insurance companies, they'd look at us and say, like, too small, unproven, too risky to deal with a business like that. So that's where we struggled, because we didn't have the scale. And that's one of the reasons we started to look at acquisition. Like, could we buy a business to give us a stronger balance sheet? But again, like, because of our performance, it took us 7 years to do $1 million. Like, it wasn't suitable for VC. We were too small for private equity, and we're trying to figure all that out.
What was it, a platform that you had kind of built from the first customer that you were kind of onboarding other customers to? Okay, so it wasn't this bespoke kind of thing for each.
The product, it's a platform that every customer gets onboarded to the same platform. So, very repeatable from that perspective.
How many customers, like for $1 million turnover at that time, how many customers would you have had? Can you remember?
Probably 4 or 5.
Right. Okay. So they were chunky enough contracts with customers, but they were small in comparison to, let's say, the bigger banks and that kind of thing.
Exactly. They're large. So it's enterprise sales. They're large contract values. Sales cycle can be 2 years in some cases. Contracts can be 3 to 5 years. We've got a couple of 10-year deals now, which is nice. But exceptionally sticky. Like, you know, when you onboard a customer, they tend to just stick around forever, because it takes a long time to get them set up, and there's a risk of change and so on. So big contracts, so big sort of annual contract values, recurring revenue type contracts, and like incredibly sticky.
Was that intentional? So I suppose if you would, the way you're talking now about things is, you know, it's great. It sounds like a great business. But were you thinking about that at the time? You know, we have something good here. It's recurring revenue. It's
didn't have a clue. It just fell into it. That's the honest answer. We got lucky with the business model. Like, if you were to put on a piece of paper all of the attributes that you want to find in a business model, we stumbled into a model that had a lot of them, if not most of them. You know, sort of blue chip customers, no bad debts, recurring revenues, good margins, sticky contracts, sort of regulatory. So there's, you know, high barriers to entry and all of this stuff. Like, we have all of that, but it was years later that we realized that we didn't even realize that we had that for a long time, you know.
And the competitors, because obviously once you started doing acquisitions, there were obviously other people doing this. So what did the kind of competitive landscape look like, and how did you look at that first acquisition and say, I think this is the way we should go?
We had competitors in to a certain extent. So in the initial business model, the example I gave earlier of some people will get a letter through the mail, others will log into a portal and do everything digitally. There's an industry out there of businesses that all they do is print and mail secure documents for banks, insurance companies, pensions providers. Like, if you get correspondence through the mail from one of these service providers, it generally doesn't come from the bank itself. They've outsourced all that. On the digital side, it's a lot less sort of mature or standardized. So oftentimes the bank and the insurance company will own that process themselves. They'll build their own portals to try and manage that internally. So with our model, we'd put our platform in, we'd take a stream of data, let's say all of their insurance renewals for today. We would generate all of the documents. So we create the policy documents. And then using our software, we would distribute whatever we could electronically to the customer. And whatever needs to be printed, we found a partner that would print and mail those documents for us. So we had no printing capability or anything like that. And what we realized was that this print partner of ours actually has all of the customers that we're trying to target. They have all the insurance companies and pensions businesses and so on. So we said, maybe we should buy that business because if we buy them, we can then go to their customers and say, you're spending £1 million now printing and mailing statements. We can do that for you for a fraction of the cost. And that's where the idea came from. That also helped us. We thought if we brought these businesses together, we'd have a stronger balance sheet, allow us to go for bigger deals. But equally then we had to get over the mental block of a small software business trying to buy a printing business. And everybody said, that's a ridiculous idea. It's a terrible thing to do. But we just couldn't shake the idea that this just made sense to us, because we can buy these businesses for relatively cheap. Like, you're not talking high revenue multiples or anything like that. And so we convinced ourselves that we should buy this printing partner of ours.
How did you know it was cheap? And why was it cheap? Because even I know it's not a software business, but it's probably still quite sticky and all the rest. There's still the risk there with sending out paper as much as there is probably with digital print, potentially even more so, because once it's there, once it's in paper, it's probably fixed. I don't know. So how did that kind of idea come about, and how did you kind of realize that this was you could get it cheap and it was a kind of good deal to do?
Again, I didn't. So you're right, though, that these businesses that we're buying, they have all the same characteristics as our software business in terms of blue chip customers, recurring revenue, good margins. But the big risk from an investment perspective was that they are sending letters and there's a decline in paper volume, and how do you manage that? And so that's what impacts their valuation. Like, we were looking at this business, and I genuinely went to Google and say, like, how do I buy a business? How do you value a business? It's valued on a multiple of EBITDA. Never heard of it, don't know what it is. I'm trying to figure all this out, like basic stuff, right? And it was just a negotiation with the owners of the business, where we basically tried to figure out what price do they need for it to make sense for them. And we were going to bank fund it. So we're going to take out a loan to buy the business. So it was very simple, back of a napkin maths for us, that if we're taking a loan out and it's a 5-year term on the loan, does the business produce enough cash to pay back the debt? And we were able to get to a price where it did, and they were happy and we were happy. And so it was rudimentary stuff, really.
Were they immediately interested when you said, how about we acquire you? Was that, or what, did you kind of get lucky in that sense as well? Or,
well, we were their partner for a while. They had a good relationship with us. We had effectively become the sales team, because we go out and pitch to the customers, and then any contracts we won, we gave them the print volume. So they were getting a good deal off the back of us. Now, we set that up wrong. We weren't even taking a margin or anything off it.
And then did you end up buying those customers that you had sort of given to them?
Yeah.
Did you? Okay.
Yeah. So we paid for the EBITDA. We just, that was theirs. They delivered it, and we bought all that. But we had a big contract coming through that I knew we were going to win. At least I felt in my gut we were going to win it, and that would be transformative both for us and for this partner. And so I was trying to use that as well as a bit of leverage to say, look, this changes the dynamic here, because this could double your EBITDA, and we need to start looking at how we manage these printed communications. It's getting so big now that potentially we need to own that channel ourselves. And I think the two lads had been running, or the three lads had been running the business for, decades, and they were probably happy to get an exit. And generally speaking, there's not a huge queue of buyers for businesses in the space, unless it's trade buyers, but the industry in Ireland is quite small.
And were they thinking, or have any of the companies, I'm sure they have since, but were any of them thinking at that time, maybe we need to do this digital communication thing and kind of do what you were doing and just add that on to their service?
Some of them, some more successfully than others. So it's difficult to change from being a printing business to being a software business, and to accept the fact that I'm going to need to hire a lot of software developers, figure out how all that works, build a product, and just sink cash for years potentially to build a software product that's enterprise level, that's bank grade. Do you know what I mean? It's a difficult shift. Whereas I feel it's easier for a software business to acquire an existing sort of secure print business that has a management team in place. So you don't need to figure all that out. Like where acquiring a going concern, if you know what I mean. At least that's how I think about it. Some other businesses have bought products like third-party applications. They haven't built their own IP, which I think is the critical piece. You need to own your own technology to differentiate yourselves. And have been somewhat successful. But generally they give it away for free. I think if you're going to switch off paper in favor of digital, the unit economics need to work for both you and the customer. You know, if you're cannibalizing your own business in favor of digital channels instead of print channels, and you're hemorrhaging money when that happens, that's not sustainable for anybody. The customer might win in the short term, but the unit economics need to work for both. And I think that's part of the magic of it. And I think that's what we've managed to figure out to a large extent.
So you were about $1 million turnover when you acquired your partner, the print partner. What did that bring you up to kind of turnover wise?
Well, we were $1 million in 2019 when we first had the notion to buy this business, but because we didn't really know what we were doing, it took us a while to actually acquire it. So we acquired it in 2021. So, you know, from the initial idea to the conversation to trying to figure out how to raise the money or who would give us the money, it wasn't until 2020 where we probably signed exclusivity with them, and then it was July 2021 when we bought the business. So 2019 was $1 million in revenue, 2020 was $2 million in revenue, and then 2021 we actually made 2 acquisitions, because as we were going through this process over the 2 years of trying to figure out how to raise the money, I convinced myself this was the way to go. So I found another one in the UK, and so we bought both of those businesses in July and August 21, and that brought us up to like 14 million revenue in that year.
Okay, so a big jump.
7x or whatever, yeah.
What then, when you bought these 2 businesses, well, maybe before we get to that, maybe just talk to me about, because you mentioned bank funding there. How did you convince the bank or potentially it was easy, but I suppose this is around kind of COVID time, so people might have been a little bit nervous about it. I don't know. How did all that kind of work out on the actual deal?
It was COVID times, I believe. We couldn't convince the banks, the pillar banks. And that's fine. Like, they have a model, and like, you know, you need to fit into their risk profile and all that. We went to the pillar banks, and they basically said, look, we were somewhat improving. Like, we had 2 million in revenue at the time, 200 grand net profit. The businesses that we were buying had really good, strong EBITDA and cash flow, but they would rather fund it once it's all together. So we need to figure out how to actually raise the money to acquire them.
Was that because of the size? They just would rather fund a certain size of acquisition?
Well, it was a massive step up for us. Like, we were going from effectively 2 to 14, like 200 grand net profit to, I don't know, like probably a couple of million in EBITDA. And from 20 people to adding another, I don't know, like tens, like 50, 60, 70 more people on. And they just thought it was risky. And I can understand why they think it would be risky. So we found a private lender, like, you know, not a private individual, like almost like venture debt type money, which effectively cost us 20% when you factor in, like, there was a 14% margin or whatever, but there was drawdown fees, prepayment fees. So extremely expensive, but that's the gap in the market that they fill. And people often say, Jesus, that was, you know, extortionate. But it was actually a really good deal for us, because it was structured in such a way that the cash flow paid back the debt. It was almost like a bridging loan to bring the businesses together, do the initial integration, prove the EBITDA, and then go back to the pillar banks and refinance. And we just backed ourselves that. So we've got nothing to lose here. Like, this stacks up on paper. We kind of thought about it. We had an integration plan. And so we used the alternative debt provider to, I think we borrowed 5 million. I think we borrowed 5 million in the first instance, and we acquired the 2 businesses, integrated them, and within like a day of the 12-month anniversary, we refinanced out with Bank of Ireland.
And that refinancing, had you not been able to do that, would you still have been able to pay back the 20% loan and the much higher rate over time? So you were still you had a kind of margin of safety, if you like, there still?
Yeah, so the way they kind of structure it in such a way that it gets a little bit more punitive as time goes on, because they want you out almost. They're not like a lender that wants you in there long term. They want to recycle that cash and put it into more deals. So the exit fees would go up. But like, it wouldn't have defaulted or anything like that. And the way these loans are structured, and this is something I didn't understand when I started down this track, is you often think of it like if you don't know how it works, you think of it like a mortgage, right? So this is how much I've borrowed, this is my interest rate. You can almost put it into a mortgage calculator and say, well, that'll be the repayment amount. But the structure is often different, whereby you're paying more interest than actually capital. And there's a lot of it, sort of a bullet payment at the end, so that when you refi, that's all tidied up. So it's structured in a way, basically, is what I'm trying to say, that despite the higher interest, oftentimes the monthly repayments are equivalent to or less than what you would pay to a pillar bank.
So when you bought the two businesses and you would essentially 7x the size of the company, you said there, we integrated them and that just sounded very easy, rather than, and I'm wondering, how much integration did you do and how difficult was it? And did you have that all planned out before? And, did you come up against, was there something kind of 3 months in where you said, I don't know why should I do this?
Absolutely. Yeah. Well, we didn't do any more acquisitions in 2022, put it that way. We were still trying to figure out, what the hell are we doing here? Like, we now have layers of management and people to manage. We've manufacturing facilities. We have CapEx and depreciation and you name it. So we were probably naive, which is helpful, because if we had have known what we know now, you mightn't have done it, if you know what I mean. So sort of blind optimism, you go in. Most of the challenges we had were just around people and culture clashes, and the type of business that we were versus the businesses that we were buying are oftentimes quite different. They're low growth, set in their ways, do a great job, but they've been doing the same thing for decades. Whereas we were a kind of a bit experimental, try new things, doesn't matter if it doesn't work, let's just like grow. At least that's what we were trying to do. And so that's where most of the challenges were from. And certainly, we didn't fully integrate within that period by the time the refi came along. But we were able to show 12 months of consistent cash flows in a consolidated basis. And that was enough for the bank to say, okay, well, we have all the historics. They brought it all together. No churn from customers. We're getting comfortable now that we could refinance this and lend on that.
What did your year look like during the kind of integration of that? And I suppose, what was the most difficult part of that integration? You mentioned culture, but how did you kind of deal with it?
A lot of people left the business, to be honest with you. We probably danced around the edges a little bit. Like, when we knew early on, if certain people weren't going to be along for the ride or they weren't going to be a good cultural fit, we should have made those decisions sooner. Because it just brings the morale down. And we didn't make the tough decisions that we should have made, and it just brings the morale down in the business. Like, generally, when we make acquisitions, it's not about, massive synergies, and we're not trying to sort of cut FTE. That's really not the strategy. We're buying existing customers so we can transform them. But when you do have a situation where somebody might be a really good employee and a good person, but they're not the right fit for the business, you just need to make that change, because they won't be happy and you won't be happy. I think that's probably the biggest mistake we made early on. Yeah, I'd say that's the main thing. Everything else can be figured out. Like, people is the hardest bloody thing in the world to manage in my experience. If the technical problems can be easily solved. It's the cultural element that is a lot harder.
How quickly did you try and make changes on those first two acquisitions? Was it, I know you said you didn't make those decisions as early as you would have liked to have, but in terms of, okay, we've got the customers now, they're technically, we own those customers. Was it a clash of, okay, we're going to try sell them those customers digital, too soon, and people were like, no, that's not what we do? Or was it more kind of operational stuff?
It was actually quite the opposite. We took the approach of, we're going to wait 6 months before we do anything. We're going to let this settle in, because we want to be kind to the people we've just acquired, and we want them to feel comfortable on that we're not the bad guys coming in. We want customers to see that we're been measured and that there's not a kind of rapid change had the total opposite impact of what you thought. Because the business that we'd acquired and the employees there were like, what's going on here? There's a vacuum, there's a void, like nothing's changed. We didn't communicate properly. And equally, I think straight after the acquisition, you have an opportunity. The customers, their ears perk up and they're listening and they're waiting to see what's going to change here. And we kind of lost some of that opportunity. So,
well, that's interesting, because that 6-month period, and I hear that all the time as advice, almost when you're acquiring a business, is to don't touch anything for a while.
Yeah.
And it had kind of the opposite effect.
Yeah, that's kind of the advice we got as well. And apologies to anybody I gave that advice in the first couple of years. At least it's not. I think that the principle is good, right? Like, before you understand the business, don't go unplugging things and making drastic change because you don't know what you're doing. So I think there's a balance, right? Thankfully, we understand these businesses quite well that we're buying now. And so when we're going through diligence and when we come in day one, we know exactly what's going on. We know where they're really strong. We know where they're really weak. So we can enact change pretty much straight away today. It's not to say we don't make mistakes, right? We still make mistakes and we still change things that, need to be reverted back, or, we could have done better. But generally we just hit the ground running now. I think particularly if you're acquiring a business where you're looking to transform it or, add a new dimension to the business, which is often a multi-year project, you just don't have time to wait. So I'd say that advice of like, figure out what you've just bought, like don't touch anything, is good advice to a certain extent. But if you know what you've bought, like if you have an accountancy practice and you're buying another accountancy practice, you understand the mechanics of that business and you understand what you can change and what you shouldn't change. So, yeah.
For you personally, then, I suppose if I kind of look at the timeline, you start a business, you don't have a customer for 3 years. So I'm sorry, your personal maybe feelings are kind of, rock bottom at that stage. You get a good customer and you start to kind of build up slowly, and then you get the acquisitions.
Yeah.
But you had said that, there was a lot of learning for you in between this, kind of at this time and going through all this. Was there a sigh of relief at any stage during this process, like a big sigh of relief? I suppose one was when you first got the customer, but, during the kind of acquisitions and trying to just figure all this out and figure out the model.
Yeah.
Was there a sigh of relief ever there?
Oh, there was loads of them. I think first customer was a milestone. The first $1 million in revenue was a milestone. Raising the money to buy the first 2 businesses, massive milestone, because I talked to so many people. I met so many corporate finance advisors, and anybody who would speak to me, I went and spoke to. And so many of them told me it was a terrible idea, basically, and you wouldn't raise the money. You're buying into a declining industry and so on. Like these were the comments we were getting. So to finally raise the money, it was actually only we got term sheets. I still didn't believe it. It was only got to a point where, we kind of said, this looks like it's actually going to happen. They're serious about giving us this money. When we got the money in, that was a sigh of relief. And as you said, it was during COVID. I signed the loan documents on my kitchen table. You kind of had to stop for a minute and say, am I doing the right thing here? The whole world shut down.
What kept you going during that time? Because and I'm only thinking, for me, sometimes when I ask someone who sounds like they know what they're talking about, I sometimes just take one answer, and I go, well, he knows, and I don't have a clue what I'm doing here, and maybe I'll just go back and to the drawing board. Kind of what kept you going to say, well, I still think this is a good idea?
It was just bloody obvious to me. Like, I just thought, I was waiting for somebody to give me a compelling reason why it was a bad idea, other than the really shallow, no thought going into it response of, well, you're buying a print business, right? And I was just trying to convey that, well, we're not. Like, yes, they are mailing letters out for customers, but we're buying a book of banks, insurance companies, pensions. We're buying a communications business that just has a very limited set of communication channels to offer their customers. And, we're buying it with debt. Like we're not leveraging these businesses up to their eyeballs. They can well cover the debt repayments. I just couldn't see why it wouldn't work, right? And I was waiting for somebody to convince me otherwise. And thankfully, we ended up finding the initial financial partner who gave us the debt, and they believed in it and they could see it. So probably a little bit of stubbornness kept you going. But when you get an idea in your head and you're saying, this is the way to go, and I know we should do it, and you'll almost run through a wall, because the more people that tell you it's not the right thing to do, or not that they tell you the right thing to do, but that you can't do it or you shouldn't do it, or this is why it won't work, but you have a bit of faith in it. That kind of motivates me anyway to get it over the line,
So I'm assuming then, so getting the financing was another one.
Yes, and then refinancing it, because it was expensive, right? It was a great product, like it got us to do exactly what we needed to do, but it was expensive, so you want to get that money out as quickly as possible. And then the refi was another big milestone. And then M&A just, to a certain extent, became business as usual for us. It was just a bit of a machine. And then last year, again, we raised private equity, so we took on external equity, whereas we'd previously done everything through debt, which again was another milestone for us.
Did you have to raise private equity? Was that, or was it something you wanted to do?
It's something I wanted to do, but we kind of had to as well at the same time. So I'd always intended to raise private equity, just because I saw such an opportunity to scale up this M&A journey we were on, and having easy access to capital and a strategic investor, I just thought would allow us to go 10 times faster. We probably raised it earlier than we thought we would, just because I found an acquisition opportunity that was a massive opportunity, basically, right? It was a massive step up for us if we could get it over the line, but we couldn't just debt fund it. Like, it was too big. We needed to get an investor to come in. And so it probably pushed that private equity investment. But it probably meant that we had to do that sooner,
So how many, so you made the first two acquisitions. Can you remember how many acquisitions you did before this kind of big one?
We've done on average one a year. So we did 2 in 2021. We did none in 2022 because we were running around with our hair on fire. 2023, we did another acquisition which doubled us in size. So by 2022, we were 20 million in revenue. So 14 the year before, 20 million in 2022. About 35 million in revenue in 2023 because we did another acquisition. And then 210 million in 2024 because we did a massive UK acquisition which 7x'd the business, basically.
Again. Another 7x. So what was the decision making process then? Because it's the smaller acquisitions, if you want to call them that, I mean, they're still nearly doubling the business every time you do it.
Yeah.
There, as you said, you kind of built a machine. This big one that you raised the private equity for must have been something you thought slightly differently about.
We had become the largest player in Ireland, pretty much, in a very short period of time. And as everybody in Ireland knows, if you really want to scale a business, you need to get off the island of Ireland. You're limiting yourself to a certain number of customers. So naturally, we looked to the UK as our nearest neighbour. And we knew who all the players were in the UK, and we were tracking these businesses, and I'd be on Company's House trying to see profitability and so on. And, we've been approaching businesses, we've just been having conversations. And again, some of these businesses are so large that we were told that we wouldn't be able to acquire them because we just wouldn't be able to get there in terms of raising the money or whatever, because we were, 35 million in revenue. But this opportunity came across my desk, and I just pretty quickly convinced myself that this was an opportunity that was too good to pass up. As the scale, the type of customers they have, we're very focused on regulated customers. So if you look at that industry, You've got companies that do like direct mail. So they'll do your Specsavers mail that comes through your posts, Sky marketing materials. We don't have any interest in any of that at all because COVID happens, the tap gets turned off. And anyway, there's lots of digital solutions for marketing. And if they're sending a letter, they're sending it for a reason. We're interested in regulated business critical communications that if COVID happens, you still need to get your bank statement. There's a regulatory obligation to send it, basically, right? That's what we're interested in. And this business that Adair, SEC, they had a great book of customers. They had 3 sites in the UK, like 450 employees. So they gave us scale. They were probably the second largest in the UK. And as we started to engage with the team, like the cultural fit, I could tell it was there straight away. And I knew, and they were so professional, like they were really impressive outfit. And I thought we could learn a lot from this business, but equally they could learn a lot from us. And I just thought it was a really good match. So, again, I convinced myself, and then it was my job to convince other people that I wasn't demented, basically, by trying to pursue this.
Was there ever, because most people who I speak to on this podcast suffer from to some degree from imposter syndrome, at some stage along the way. Whereas, for you, so 35 million, is a reasonable, especially in Ireland, is a kind of a reasonable sized business, to be managing. But, you go to someone that's whatever, 150 million turnover business, which is, so much bigger. And, perhaps, well, I don't know, was there a feeling ever that, there was the fit there, but I'm walking into a room now, these guys are going to laugh at me, or.
No. I backed myself 100%. I was very aware that they mightn't take me seriously initially. But I suppose that was the job. Like you're effectively selling. Although you're acquiring, you're effectively selling, right? You're trying to convince them that you're the right partner and why, and that you can come up with the cash. So maybe in the early days I would have had sort of some doubts, but I backed myself 100%. And, I think you have to, all right? Because if you let that doubt creep in, and particularly when other people are telling you that you're going the wrong direction or you shouldn't do that, like if you listen to all that, you'll just get so bogged down in decision fatigue. Generally speaking, for me, if your gut is generally right. But that doesn't mean if new information comes in, you shouldn't change your mind. You should always be open to changing your mind. But if my gut tells me something is the right thing to do, I generally have a good sense, and I'll pursue that until someone else or myself can convince me that it's not the right way to go.
What did the initial conversation look like with this big company? Was it, do you mind if I come in and talk about buying your business?
Well, they had advisors, and they had corporate finance advisors in the UK, and so his initial call was with them, and they had the natural skepticism of, we had the benefit of having done M&A before and raised money and closed deals, and we could give references and all that, but they were small deals. Like the acquisition we had done previously to the one that we were looking to buy in the UK, the big one, was like 10x or more smaller, So I managed to convince him that it was worth meeting me, but ultimately they went into exclusivity with somebody else because I got involved late, right? So they had already been talking to another party, and just through, the industry or whatever, I got wind that this might be happening. So I was picking up the phone, trying to figure out who's the right person to talk to. And ultimately they went into exclusivity with somebody else. But I think that other bidder wasn't, they were more of a tire kicker. And so they cancelled that exclusivity, and that opened up a window for me to basically jump on the opportunity and put in a bid. And ultimately that's what we did. We put in a bid, and we negotiated with the sellers. We convinced them that we were the right people to back, that we could raise the money, and ultimately we went into exclusivity with them last year. Now, it took longer than we had hoped to close it, but we closed it the day before Christmas Eve, thank God.
Your first before your first acquisition,
Yeah.
you had thought, well, they have the customers, they're just servicing them in a more paper based way. We'll like to maybe come in, introduce the digital format, and we'll get some synergies essentially from that, or we'll get some potential benefit, maybe improve the margins and whatever else. How has that plan gone since the first acquisition, or has it is that kind of not the idea anymore?
That's still the idea. Like, we tweaked it, and there's different layers to it, but essentially we buy the customers, we onboard into our software, we try to sort of optimize pricing where we can, so that the final stage, which is digitization, so that benefits both us and the customer, and we just try to roll that model out across every customer that we acquire. That's gone really, really well. It's not a panacea. Like, we don't just come in and then, like, within 6 months these businesses are high growth SaaS businesses, right? But we have customers that we've migrated to 90% digital channels, very margin accretive. Customer saves an absolute fortune, and we actually don't need that to happen on every customer. We only need it to happen on enough customers that I can, like, just transform the economics of the business when it's done properly.
So it's kind of win-win-win, because you're I suppose there's less operational for you. I suppose there's less operational complexity and cost, I'd imagine, in the digital side of things.
Yeah.
And then it's cheaper for the customer as well, because they're sending out digital communications rather than...
Correct.
Okay.
So basically, the biggest cost of the customer is the on-post fees or the Royal Mail fees, and they all just get wiped. Like, it's €1.40 you send a letter now, It's like just incredible. So if you can start to erode away at that, and if you can get to 70, 80, 90% digital, for, think about a bank here with 1 million customers, or think of a UK bank with multiples of that. It's astronomical, the amount of money that they save. Really, really, really astronomical. And we get a better margin because we shift from paper to digital, and we facilitate all that with our platform. And it's one of those models where everybody's aligned on the same goal, and we win and they win. And we've just kind of devised this model where we have skin in the game, and it's really nice when it works. Now, it doesn't work every time, because some customers will already be 90% digital. They've done the hard yards themselves, but that's fine. And we'll continue to print and mail their secure documents, and we'll sell them and work with them in other ways digitally. But when it works, it really works. And we're just trying to figure out now, how do we really scale it up?
Sorry, it's funny, how do we really scale it up? It's just where you've gone in the space of 5 years. It's an incredible scale already. What does that mean to you? Do you mean from a digital kind of transformation point of view, or from a side?
From every angle. I'm terrible at moving the goalposts, and yeah, I think that's, I'm never satisfied, right? Which is probably a flaw. I don't know, but if I, to your point earlier, if I had said that this is where we'd be by 2025, that we'd be at this, the business would be at this level, I say, oh geez, I'd be delighted with that. Sure, that'd be game over. But you just look at what's next on the horizon. What I meant by scaling up, that was the mechanics of, when we buy one of these businesses, how do we get more customers onto the platform sooner? How do we drive the digital volume sooner, so that we benefit from the acquisition and integration a lot quicker? But of course, what comes with figuring that out is more M&A, so you can do more faster. And I've said before, like, I think there's a very clear path to us doing $1 billion in annual revenues, if we just rinse and repeat the same model that we've followed up until now. And I think people probably would have laughed at that a couple of years ago, but I think what we've done in the last few years has proven that that's probably pretty doable.
Well, $1 billion now is only 5x your current size, so you've jumped 7 times in one acquisition previously. So it's not a crazy. I don't know nothing about your market now, and I had the other players and everything else, but it's it's certainly not a laughable.
No, but then you start to think, actually, as we grow as a business, do we just keep doing what we've always done, or do we need to look at it differently? Because we've always bought the same type of business, larger every time, but the same profile of business. And actually, like, we're not perfect. Our product has strengths and weaknesses, like every product has. And we're starting to look now at more technology businesses. Is there technology in the market that we could acquire to, cover off some of our blind spots or our weak spots, whatever you want to call it? And they don't come with the same scale, but they give you something else, to improve the business that you already have. So we set ourselves a goal of getting to 100 million by the end of last year. We did 2, which was like phenomenal. So that came sooner. That probably the size we're at now came a lot sooner than expected. So we're kind of taking stock to figure out what actually is the growth strategy from here. Is it more of the same, or do we need to supplement that with something else, or totally change direction? And I think that's a really nice place to be in, because we are at a size now where we have options and we can decide which is the right track to go.
Does it feel better now? I know you said you're moving the goalposts, and that's probably normal considering, once you have more resources, like, well, what is the next step?
But right? I'm not just going to stop either.
Sure, exactly. Yeah, right. And it was your kind of, you're very young, and you started this business very young, and it's kind of, it's been great. But does it feel better now than it did, say, if you said there you've got, you have options.
Yeah.
Is that a better place to be than where you were before?
Oh, so much better. Like, you can romanticize the early days where it was real scrappy and we're starting up and you win your first customer, but it was bloody hard and it was so demoralizing. And you don't actually know if it's going to work. But publicly you're out there telling everybody everything's fantastic, because you have to say that, right? Now we have a real business that has scale. It has an exceptional leadership team, an exceptional management team. The people in the business are so strong, and you kind of look at this organization that, has materialized, and you say to yourself, Jesus, I'm very proud of this. And you can make strategic tweaks, and you have enough customers that when you make these tweaks, you can see the impact. Does that work? Does it not work? When you're making money as well, you have breathing space. You can invest. You can have a number of different projects on at the same time. It's just totally different. It's totally different once you get to a certain scale. And equally, having the ability to raise investment because you're proven, you've got a track record, much better than the early days. I don't know. I think I'd need my head examined if I ever started another business again. Like, I'd probably buy into something. I'd probably acquire a business, because just those first 7 years was just like painful. Yeah.
It was going to be the question I'd ask next in a kind of another frame. People probably get onto you looking for advice. You're now very accomplished, and you started this business, and now it's the size it is. Is that something you would advise people, is to start looking at acquisitions and how you can kind of stabilize things earlier?
Oh God, I'm very cautious giving advice, because like, when you have a hammer, everything looks like a nail, or whatever that saying is. Like, my worldview and my experience of how I solve my problem, it's kind of ingrained in my mind. It doesn't mean that that's the same thing for you. It's not going to solve your problem. So sometimes, I do get people reaching out all the time, and I try where I can to meet people and offer advice or have a coffee, and I'm happy to do that. Like, if anybody wants to reach out or anything, I'm happy to do that, right? But sometimes you don't know what the right advice is either. Like, everybody's situation is so unique and complex. But I think what's beneficial, and what was beneficial to me, is just you meet as many people as you can. They all give you their advice or perspective, or they ask a challenging question. And over time, you'll make your own mind up, which is the way to go,
Have you had a mentor or anything along the way, or one person in particular maybe that you've that has helped you kind of get to where you are?
So I'd say I've had a few at different stages, or I'd have different mentors. There wouldn't be formalized mentorship relationships, let's say, but I'd have different people that I could pick up the phone to in a certain discipline that would offer me advice. Certainly in the early days, it would have been my dad, just entrepreneur himself, built a number of different businesses. So I think I would have leaned on him a lot in the early days for the basic questions like, what's EBITDA mean? You know, those kind of things. But then as you progress, you know, I'd have a really good lawyer, I'd have good corporate finance advisors. You know, you've good bankers and good private equity partners. MML are our private equity partners now. A good chairman. Like, I speak to those guys pretty regularly. So the benefit of sort of more time behind the wheel, your network really grows. And I think that's something that I had like when we did our first million in sales, I knew nobody. We didn't leave the office. We were very like insular, just focused on the business. What the last few years have shown me is that your network is just the most important thing. Being able to pick up the phone, get advice, speak to somebody who's been there and done it. I think that has played a huge part in our success, actually, and continues to.
What have you learned about yourself? Because when you look at your kind of trajectory, you said it earlier. You know, it's always the kind of, there's been a few lucky breaks, a few, oh, maybe let's have a look at that. That looks like a good idea. Oh, it turned out to be good. You know, I think if you were, I suppose in the Army Reserve, and someone, I don't know if you would have said, I'm going to be good at mergers and acquisitions for this reason, you know, and I'm kind of interested about your kind of learning about your kind of self knowledge and how that's kind of changed over time throughout this journey.
So I think you know, I kind of buy into the, if you think you can or you think you can't, you're probably right. I think I live by that. So I said I back myself a lot. I think it's very easy to doubt yourself, but actually, I think if you back yourself and give yourself the opportunity, I think you can surprise yourself at what you can do. And I think that just gets verified over time, and that builds your self-confidence, right? If you really double down on something and you achieve it, like, that's so good for your self-confidence that the next time you come up against a similar situation, it just gets easier and easier and easier. And I think nobody really has a clue what they're doing half the time. Everybody portrays that they're experts and they know what they're doing, right? But everybody's had a first day at work, or everybody's the first time encountering a problem. You know, even the best investors in the world bought their first business at one stage. And it's not rocket science if you just give yourself the latitude to figure it out. And if you're open to saying, I don't have a clue what's going on here, or ask the questions and not be worried to look like an idiot. And so I suppose that's what I've learned about myself, that, you know, I have the ability to back myself to do something, even if at the outset I'm in the dark, right? But I figure it out as I go. And I'm very ambitious as well. So I set myself big goals and big targets. Informally, a lot of the times I'll just decide in my head, okay, well, we'll do 1 billion in sales or whatever, because it's a big target and that motivates me. So yeah, I think it's just, I've learned over the years that I probably have a greater capacity to figure stuff out and deliver than I probably would have given myself credit for during school or in my early days, just because I actually never put myself in a situation where I had to deliver or figure it out, you know. So yeah, I probably rambled on a bit there, but that's just my stream of consciousness.
Not at all. Thank you very much. That was very enlightening and very, very interesting and poignant, I think, and it'll I would expect to be a help to people listening. You mentioned 1 billion, and you can see a clear path to that now. What else might be as part of that? Is there anything kind of in the back of your mind that you're thinking, okay, $1 billion, maybe we could do 10 billion, or maybe there's some other things, whether in this business or other business you're thinking about. What else kind of in the ether, or maybe in the back of your mind is there in terms of what the future might hold?
Growing outside of the UK and Ireland, so spend relative amount of time in the States in the last couple of years, just again building my network, meeting potential partners, acquisitions, joining industry networking groups, and been present, boots on the ground, so that people know who you are. So we will most likely at some stage in the future buy a business in the States if we can find the right business and if the timing is right. But I'd really like to internationalize the business and, you know, go further afield in UK and Ireland. And I suppose that's the main thing. Like, I think what we're doing now is working. Needs a few tweaks, and there's a couple of things that, you know, we need to address. But generally speaking, it's working, and I don't want to mess with it too much. I kind of want to do more of the same, but at a bigger scale or further afield. So I think that's probably in the immediate sort of short or medium term, let's say, it'll just be getting out of Ireland and the UK. Only for the reason that, look, we've got a really great book of customers in Ireland and the UK. And I just think when we look at the States, well, they need our product, basically. And I think we could do exceptionally well there.
Nick Keegan, it's been a pleasure talking to you today. Thank you very much for coming in and doing the podcast. As we talked about before, I had heard you on an American podcast to do with acquisitions, and I just thought, I don't know why I haven't reached out to that guy before. So it's been a pleasure having you in, and thank you very much for doing it.
No bother. Listen, I really enjoyed the conversation, so thanks for having me.
Best of luck, Nick.
Good man.